All right, I want you to have a continuing sense of what we're up against and who we're up against. Newsweek Magazine, Time Magazine, I don't really know what purpose they serve anymore, since weekly news seems to be kind of stupid. If we can get news by the second, access to wire stories right away. But apparently these magazines still exist, so certain very important people can keep telling us how we need to manage ourselves. Because, you know, we as a free people, a mature people, parents, grandparents, we don't know how to manage ourselves. We need people like John Meacham to tell us how to do it. Managing executive, whatever, muckety-muck over at Newsweek. And he has a piece in there from the magazine issue dated February 22nd. And he says in part, listen to this, from the filibuster in the Senate to the Supreme Court's decision in the Citizens United case, there is a renewed sense that Washington works only for itself, fighting for narrow partisan advantages while large national and international issues go unresolved. Now think about that. Because of the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United, which opens free speech, and because of the Senate filibuster, which the Democrats use time and again to block outstanding judicial nominees out of the Bush administration, he brings this up now, only now, because conservatives and Republicans are using the filibuster to stop an unconstitutional act from being rammed down the public's throat. The public doesn't want government-run health care. Only now he's offended at the Supreme Court, not when it ruled in the EPA case that carbon dioxide could be a pollutant, which is absolutely silly, but that in the Citizens United case that the First Amendment actually stands for free speech. Then John Meacham over there at Newsweek, then he's moved. He's moved. Now what's he want to do? Well, let's listen some more, shall we? Reforming the Senate to make it more difficult for a single lawmaker to stop the chamber's business cold, and restructuring campaign finance order in order to tie legislators more directly to small donors rather than corporate interests are among the ideas in circulation. First of all, Citizens United had nothing to do with direct contributions to candidates. Moron. It was contributions, money spent actually, not even contributions, money spent on advocacy ads prior to an election. Moron. So he doesn't even know what he's writing about. Anyway, he goes on here. He says, Lawrence Lessig, a professor at Harvard Law School, is proposing passing the Fair Elections Now Act, which would attempt to reduce congressional dependence on big-dollar fundraising, and is also calling for a constitutional convention to weigh other questions of reform. Now, let me slow you down here. What they would really like is an unelected Politburo of professors from Harvard and Yale and Columbia and Princeton and on and on and on ruling your lives. They really hate the Democratic part of a republic. They really like the unelected, lifetime appointed judges. They really like these hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of bureaucrats pushing paper and bullying you. They're so much smarter than the rest of us. I mean, the ballot box is such a nasty thing. On the one hand, they want everyone to have access to the vote, even illegals. On the other hand, they don't want the vote to count for much, ladies and gentlemen, as they institutionalize their agenda more and more in the courts and the bureaucracy, so that the will of the people is obstructed at every turn. And when they don't get all the power they want to bully us and tell us what to do and torment us, then they say the system's broken. Let's go on here. He, citing this Professor Lessig, says the framers imagined a time when the government might be captured. And they created a mechanism to respond to that capture. Lessig writes, if 2/3 of the legislatures of the states demanded, Congress must call a convention. That convention then must meet and deliberate about amendments to the Constitution. If it agrees, it then proposes amendments to the states. 3/4 of the states must then ratify any amendment before it becomes law. Thus, 12 states of 50 have the power to veto any change, meaning no change could happen unless it appealed to a solid group of red states, a solid group of blue states. Meacham says, perhaps it's time to invoke the convention clause and see what happens. Now, there you go. Listen to that throwaway line and how immensely ignorant it is. Perhaps it is time to invoke the convention clause and see what happens. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think we could collect a better group of minds at a constitutional convention than the one we had in Philadelphia. Who would go to this constitutional convention? It would scare me to death. How would you limit what's done at this constitutional convention? You can't. Blue states, red states, who cares? The problem is we don't uphold the Constitution that we have. The problem is that the amendment procedure, apart from a convention, the only amendment procedure that's ever been used, the supermajority of Congress proposing amendment to the states and a supermajority of the states having to ratify it, isn't even used anymore because the left amends the Constitution every damn day through the courts, through the bureaucracy. You don't even have to go through the formal amendment process anymore. They issue fiats. It's unbelievable. And this guy says it's not good enough. We need a constitutional convention to totally undo the Constitution. That's what he means. He doesn't have the guts to say it, so I'll say it for him. And just what we need, another Harvard law professor with another idea. Our country's going to hell because of all the Harvard law professors and Yale law professors who make a joke out of our Constitution and our judiciary and our government, who write stupid damn books and review articles telling us that the 14th Amendment means something else, or the Commerce Clause doesn't mean what it says. So here we have this moron, John Meacham, who's held up as a great intellect at this useless Newsweek publication, which has no purpose, citing another Harvard Law School professor who wants to overthrow this nation with a constitutional convention. And there are some of my friends out there who want a constitutional convention. I won't use their last names. Randy, buddy of mine, you know what you want to do, but I don't agree with you. I think you're dead wrong. And as I've said before, I wrote a letter once when I was a kid to Barry Goldwater. And I asked him what he thought. I have it here somewhere in the bunker. And I asked him what he thought, his answer, about a constitutional convention. And he said, rightly, no way. You can't control it. You can't limit it. And God help us, are the types of people who would be sent to that convention. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, they would do to the Constitution things you can't possibly imagine. The same authoritarianism that they seek to illegitimately impose on us, they would love to do so, quote unquote, legitimately through a completely revised Constitution. So no, we do not support a constitutional convention. The bulk of serious thinking conservatives. And the line is even worse than that, Meacham writes. Perhaps it's time to invoke the convention clause and see what happens. You see, this is a radical statement. This is the difference between those of us who believe in this society and its principles and those who don't. You don't hold a constitutional convention and see what happens. You can destroy this society. You don't do something to see what happens when there's so much at stake. He goes on, he says, it's intellectually inconsistent to defend the Constitution as we know it, but then oppose the attempt to use the Constitution's own provisions for reform. Again, he's fundamentally ignorant. You can have all the reform you want in the states, in localities. And you can reform the federal government too. And one of the ways you reform it is to put it back in its box where the boundaries are set. It's only inconsistent if what you want to do is unconstitutional. And that's not reform. That's lawlessness.